Welcome to Flunking the Written, a fully spoiled Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast in which two Uber fans break down every episode of the show. Join Kimberly and Megan every Tuesday as they overanalyze each scene and discuss the Buffyverse at large. Now let's meet up with the Scoobies and get into this week's episode of Flunking the Written.
What can I say? I flunked the written.
Alright, Kim, so What's My Line, Part 1, written by Howard Gordon and Marty Noxon, which is exciting. Marty Noxon's first episode, and it's also directed by David Solomon, and it's his first episode to direct as well. So I'm going to read the blurb, and then I'm going to immediately rant about the blurb. But the blurb is, as career week at school has Buffy wondering what her future may have been like, Spike hires 3 professional bounty hunters to ensure she has no future at all. And I'm just like, okay, I understand that the Order of Taraka is kind of awful and just a crap part of this episode. But when the blurb itself, specifically points out that, it's just 3 of them. And the episode tries to build them up as such an intimidating force that's just going to be coming over and over and over nonstop, and Buffy's never going to be able to fight them all off. It's funny to me.
Yeah, and so much more stuff happens in the episode than just that.
Yeah.
Way more stuff. Although several of the things that I thought happened in this episode don't happen until the part 2.
Well, and this 2-parter is significant. And I recognize it as significant because of several things that happen. But it's never really been one of my favorites. And I think part of it is some of the gimmicky stuff that's in it, the Order of Taraka. Some of it is the handling of Kendra. A big part of it is just, it feels like it's an episode or a set of episodes that just had a checklist that it had to get through. And so the story overall is a little muddy for my liking, because it's more just all right, we ticked off that box. Okay, now we ticked off that box. It just had a lot of stuff that they were trying to get done in just a couple of episodes. And it's kind of unfortunate when you think about season 2 and all of the episodes in it that are really kind of filler.
Yeah, that kind of seemed like a waste of time.
Yeah, so I have some issues with pacing in this episode for sure.
You'll have to, when we get there, tell me about your problems with Kendra, because I kind of like how they showed how different Slayers can be.
My issues are almost entirely the accent.
Oh, yeah.
Kendra's probably going to be discussed more at length in part 2, just because she's more featured in that. But yeah, most of it's the shoehorned in accent that they did.
Yeah, which that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
The accent. She could have been that exact same personality and type of Slayer and everything with her history. Without the accent being put in. The first scene starts in the school lounge, and they're just hanging out and seem to be taking a test, some kind of aptitude test, to decide what their future careers could be, and that's what they're talking about. It's a pretty funny conversation. Cordelia walks by and is reading her test and says, I aspire to help my fellow man. Check. And then goes, as long as he's not smelly or dirty or something. Which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
And then Buffy points out that she shouldn't even be bothering to do the test because, her future is already mapped out. She's, destined to be Slayer. Basically until she dies. And so she's not really going to have a career. I always thought this was kind of weird because instead of Willow kind of arguing with her or trying to make her see that she can have a life outside of slaying, Willow's like, so why are you even taking the test? And I know it's to set up for the next comment where Buffy, says Principal Snyder's making her do it because he likes to make her jump through hoops. But it still doesn't seem very Willowy.
Yeah.
To say that.
Willow tends to be the biggest optimist. So she would want Buffy to believe that she could still have a life outside of slaying. And this is a reoccurring thing that we deal with, especially in the more adult years when, Buffy has to resort to things like slinging hamburgers at a fast food joint in order to make ends meet. It is something that she doesn't have the ability to dedicate the time one would need to develop the skill sets for a regular career because of having to be the Slayer. And this is where we start with the most annoying fun fact about the Slayer is the fact that the Watchers Council does not provide any kind of living wage or expenses or anything for her.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And it's always obnoxious every time I watch it that I get to one of these episodes and I'm just like, why are they not giving her any compensation whatsoever? It is
one of the reasons might be that they don't really live long enough to need it, because most of them die before they leave their parents' house.
Well, and I think again and again we see this idea of
throughout history when they didn't have parents or had to leave their parents or whatever, the Watcher took care of them. Because, like, Kendra's Watcher seems to have raised her.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say is, like, I feel like Buffy's such an different scenario than what most Slayers are presented to be. And most Slayers are put into the care of their Watcher, and their Watcher takes care of them more so than Giles. Like, I mean, Giles obviously does a fantastic job as a Watcher, nothing to, take away from his value and his connection that he has with her. But he's not, taking her into his home and feeding her and paying, her bills or anything like that. But we have seen in scenarios where it seems like that may be the relationship between Slayer and Watcher in other instances.
That kind of falls apart a little bit in season 3 when they have the helpless episode. Because and spoiler, obviously, but Giles gets fired from the council because he's become too close to Buffy.
Yeah.
And treats her like a daughter. And they fire him for that. But you would think that, a Watcher that received his Slayer in some kind of ceremony when she was like 2 and raised her up would be even more attacked.
Yeah. There's some things that don't really add up. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some issues.
Yeah. And I think we'll have to look at it more in that episode when that comes around. But, there's been several signs that it is not uncommon for Watchers to become very, very attached to their Slayers.
Yeah. And in season 7, when we see all the potential Slayers start arriving, there's a lot of them that were already with their Watchers and being trained and stuff, but a lot of them weren't.
Yeah.
A lot of them were just like living normal lives.
Yeah. There's just too many potentials that they can't get them all.
Way too many of them were from the United States and spoke English. I'm just saying. But I'm sure we will talk about that a lot during season 7. Okay, so Buffy pretty much, says she's only doing it because Principal Snyder said she has to, and Willow kind of like, aren't you curious what kind of career you could have had? And Buffy's like, yeah, not really, because it's my fate and I don't want to go there. So it kind of sets us up for the episode here.
Yeah. And from there, we cut to the factory, and Drusilla is playing with some tarot cards while Spike and Dalton the vampire, are translating from the book that was stolen from Giles a couple episodes back. And this is another example of Spike's lack of patience that we see with Drusilla in these episodes, because Drew asked Spike to dance and he snaps at her and he immediately regrets it. But we've seen this happen a couple of times where Spike snaps at Drew on a dime and she always just kind of whimpers back and recoils and stuff like that. I'm trying to think if there was ever an example where he snapped at her when she wasn't quite in this state and what her reaction was then. Because when she's at full power, she's so different, as far as her ability to take control of a situation.
We're going to see soon. We'll have to pay attention and see if we can see any of that. I'm going to point out that there's not really a whole lot of changes in this scene in the script book, although the description of her several times throughout this scene is she is supposed to be way more weak and frail than she comes across. The script book has where she's covered with bruises and skeletal and can barely stand, and she starts to faint 3 or 4 times and is waving because she can't stand up straight. She seemed sick and frail watching the scene, but originally they had planned for it to be way worse.
Yeah.
On death's door, I guess.
And you definitely I think I don't know this for sure, but I think a lot of people expected that this would also impact her sanity, that when they went through the ritual, she would be more sane when she came through it, which really isn't the case. She's just so much more powerful, so much more strong. Yeah. And so, like, some of the things that she does now, the way that she communicates, it's much more depressing. She seems to enjoy her insanity when she goes through the ritual. But, like, here it almost feels like the crazy stuff she says, like, wears her down, whereas...
Like, she wishes she could communicate
like,
better,
she wishes she could communicate better. Like, there's just something about it that feels... like, she seems to enjoy herself more when people can't understand her and she's powerful. But when she's weak and people can't understand her, it seems like she...
Just weak.
Yeah, it just seems like it becomes a bigger issue for her because she has to rely on communication so much, and she just can't communicate very well. It's not her strong suit. She doesn't have that ability, but when she's super strong and people don't understand her, she finds it, like, enjoyable because she doesn't have to rely on communication as much because she can just take what she wants.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, she starts cooing and tries to leave to go change Miss Edith.
And then in the script book at that scene where Spike just kind of stops her, she faints and he has to pick her up.
Oh.
In the script.
Spike explains that they're running out of time and that bloody Slayer keeps mucking up the works, and they have a little exchange and end in a kiss and go back to the translation project. Dalton explains that it's not Latin and he's not even sure it's a language. And then we have another, like, clairvoyant moment from Drusilla where she's explaining that there's a key and the book is written in a code, and Spike's excited now, and so he picks her up and they dance in one of the, like, most beautiful little clips. I love their little dance where he just picks her up and spins her around and they're just so happy.
And they're saying they're going to dance on the Slayer's grave. Yeah. Okay. And so the next scene is Buffy in a cemetery, and she's moving toward a mausoleum that is like the picture that it showed Drusilla looking at. She looks inside and sees that there is somebody breaking into a vault. He reaches in and grabs something and then takes off. And then, Buffy confronts him and they start fighting. And then there's another one behind her who attacks her, and she starts fighting with him. She ends up staking him and then turns around, and the one behind her that had the thing is gone. And she goes, one down, one gone. And she's like all upset about it. And I'm like, why would he wait? Like, I put it in my notes, Buffy, why would he wait for you?
You just expect him to sit patiently.
Yeah, he's going to stand there and wait for you to, kill his friend and then kill him. Of course he's going to run. It just seems weird the way she's so surprised and shocked that he's gone.
To be fair, we have seen signs of, like, a vampire just waiting for his turn before, so maybe she's just like, oh, sometimes they don't do that.
Yeah. So, and then she heads home, and we see her bedroom and Angel's waiting for her, kind of just wandering around her room. She looks in the window and then crawls in and scares him. And she thinks that's funny because she's like, yeah, now you know what it's like, stealth guy. Which I thought was funny. And then they start talking, and I love this part. It's such an awesome touch. She says,
and you don't have to whisper. Mom's in LA till Thursday. Art buying her something.
Then why'd you come in through the window?
Habit.
And I love it because the look on her face is just like, why did I do that? So it's hilarious. I love that little touch.
My understanding of the behind the scenes of that moment is they wrote her coming through the window and scaring Angel part and fell so in love with that. And then they realized that they had already had this plan for Joyce to be out of town for this episode. And they were just like, how do we explain that? And then they were just like, we'll just say it's habit. And it works so well.
It's so funny.
It takes the initial joke that they had and then applies a whole nother layer of joke on top of it. And it's just, it was one of the best decisions that they made. Like a little happy accident to have this secondary layer of joke on Buffy sneaking through the window to scare Angel. So I mentioned that, like, these episodes aren't as high on my list as I would like them to be. But I will tell you right now, this is the best Angel we've gotten so far in the series, in my opinion. I think Angel in this episode is fantastic across the board. They let him do so much more and let David play so much more than he normally gets to play. And like in this scene alone, there's several things that like took me aback. I was just like, oh wow, they like let him have a role in this episode that's so much different than what we're used to. And they kind of point out the old Angel in this because he said he just kind of was having a bad feeling, and Buffy's just like, oh, Angel comes with bad news, like just, you know,
like he used to do.
Yeah. It's just like such a reference to the way that they used to interact. And you'll notice she even says big surprise when he says that, which is, again, I feel like that word choice is always very specific when they say surprise.
Because a big surprise is coming.
Big surprise is coming. So another thing to note, and I'm not sure if this is the first time. I was going to go back and look, and then I didn't. But the Claddagh ring is very prominently displayed on Angel's hand in this scene, and it is with the heart facing him. Okay. So that was a significant detail, and I'm pretty sure, as far as I can remember, this is the first appearance of it. So that again ties into that idea of surprise, like everything's starting to lead to that moment. But yeah.
Speaking of the Claddagh ring, I actually have one of those with all of my children's birthstones on it that Adam had made for me.
That's awesome.
Which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
And, you know, he made it because I'm such an obsessive Buffy fan. I had it made for me.
He knows you. But yeah, Buffy kind of snaps at Angel, and Angel's upset. And then Buffy apologizes and explains that she's just been cranky miss, and says that they're having a thing at school, to which Angel replies, career week. And she's just like, how did you know? And you have this amazing I lurk line.
Yeah. It's like, that's a little creepy, a little stalkerish. I lurk.
At least he's self-aware.
I'm guessing that would be him, like, lurking around the bronze, listening to everybody, listening to what the kids are talking about. They have a very angsty conversation about Buffy and her wanting a normal life. And for the record, it's actually a lot longer in the script than it was in the scene. They cut some of it out.
Yeah.
Nothing really big, just basically going over the same things over and over, and they cut that out.
I feel like that this is a very important scene, because even without the curse loophole and Angel becoming bad, there's still clearly issues and complications with this relationship, and Angel points them out specifically in this, and you have, of course, this lovely visual beat of her looking in the mirror and seeing just herself, kind of, you know, visualizing the fact that her future is not really going to be able to include Angel realistically, if a normal life is what she has. But she explains that Angel is the one freaky thing in her freaky world that still makes sense, but that part of her wishes that they could just be regular kids. And this is where Angel, again, like, they just give him more to play with here. Like, they give him the funny lurk line. He has the moment with Mr. Gordo, and then here he's just like, well, that's not me. I'm not that guy, is basically what he's saying. You know, this is not something I can be for you. And then she comes back with, well, okay, a regular kid and her cradle robbing creature of the night boyfriend. And then we get a genuine, like, full grin. Just, this doesn't happen with Angel. You don't get this side of Angel. So, I mean, it's showing that he's getting happier, which of course is a big build up to something that's coming.
But not good. Don't be happy, Angel.
But there is, of course, the fun blooper where right after they have this, like, kind of poignant, significant scene where they show Angel not reflecting in the mirror, he walks across the room and you can see his reflection in another mirror on the wall.
Yeah, oops.
Whoopsie.
Well, he picks up a picture, and basically we go into Buffy and how she was obsessed with Dorothy Hamill and ice skating. Which is never mentioned before and is never mentioned again. So, but yeah, she was completely obsessed, and her whole life was ice skating and Dorothy Hamill and everything. But then we literally never hear about it again.
Yeah. Well, and in the discussion we had about the Dark Age and Giles's comment about how the Bay City Rollers is real music, and that Reddit thread that I was reading along with that, there were some comments about this as well as kind of references that don't really make sense, because if you look at the timeline storyline, Dorothy Hamill was really at her peak well before Buffy was even born.
Well, I thought that too.
So
I didn't bother to look up the years that Dorothy Hamill was popular, but I did. I was like, wasn't she like before Buffy's time?
Yeah, it's a weird reference no matter how you look at it.
Because they probably could have found a more modern or recent ice skater for this. Maybe probably not one as well known, but they could have found one.
Yeah.
To use.
And there's definitely ways that if they had really built this up into the character, there's definitely ways where like Joyce was a really big fan, and because Joyce was a really big fan, Buffy's a really big fan, because that happens.
That could have been a part of it.
But it's not really significant enough to bother developing all of that, except for the fact that she says that it was her life. Like she had a shrine at a point in her life to Dorothy Hamill.
Wanted to be her and had her hair cut and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, Angel says that there's an ice skating rink closed on Tuesdays, and they make plans to go and skate there while it's closed. So I assume they break in.
Yeah. I mean, I assume the door's just unlocked closed. Because we've already established how things work in Sunnydale.
Well, yeah, kind of. But Sunnydale now has an ice skating rink.
Yeah.
In this tiny town with all these other things that we've
I have comments. I have comments coming up about this because in the next scene...
So do I.
We have Cordelia and Xander looking at the results from their aptitude tests. And Cordelia notes that she's going to be either a personal shopper or a motivational speaker according to this test, which both of those work for me. I'm good with either of those. Oddly enough, it didn't have second in command of a investigative service in Los Angeles. Yeah, didn't have that as the option. I don't know why. But then Cordy looks up Xander's results and laughs and walks away. Now Xander's last name is Harris, so that's H-A, and she has to look on the second page of the H through K to find H-A-R. So there's like a page and a half of other H-A's before Xander, and I'm just like, how big is this school?
Well, I mean, how big is this school that like nobody has met Oz before? Like, none of our main characters have ever met Oz before this episode. You know? How big is this school?
It kind of reminds me... They don't even
know who he is.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the goof that they did in the graduation episode of Boy Meets World, where they brought back a bunch of characters that hadn't been around for a while, and they're like, where have you been? And they're like, oh, I've just been on that side of the school. And they're like, oh, we don't go over there. So, like, there's, like, this whole portion of Sunnydale High that our characters just never go. That's where all the other students live.
But apparently Xander is going to make a good prison guard.
Yeah.
Which I remember doing this test in high school, and it gives you like a bunch of options. Most people would have like 4 or 5 options. Not just like one, like all these other, 1 or 2, like all this. I actually remember my top one for it when I did this was a mortician.
Oh.
I don't remember the others, but I do remember that one because it was so strange.
Yeah.
It was mortician. Yeah. So then Xander meets up with Willow and Buffy. He informs Buffy that she was assigned to the booth for law enforcement professional. And then we find out that Willow wasn't assigned at all. Like, her name's not even there. And she's very upset because she used a number 2 pencil.
I love that. I love that. She was just like, but I handed in my test. I used a number 2 pencil.
Yeah.
And just like, Willow.
But she was not up there. It seems to me like Willow, with her personality, she would like immediately go find someone in charge and find out why she's not on there. But she doesn't. She's told why later, but I would think she would go find somebody and be like, why I'm not on here? Why am I not on here? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Then we have Buffy seeing Giles, and he's got a giant load of books that he says he's been indexing the Watcher diaries, and they talk a little bit about last night's patrol, and she tells him what she found in the graveyard, that she ran into vampires stealing something, and he's a little worried about it. And Buffy's kind of making jokes about how it was some old thing that was downright crusty, and Giles loses his patience a little bit and says, so you made no effort to find out what it was, and kind of like he's annoyed with her, which doesn't really seem like Giles.
Yeah, both of them feel off to me. Like,
yeah, they do to me too.
Buffy is also just like, and she points it out herself that she's just been cranky because of this whole career week thing. And so, you know, at least there's some kind of excuse for Buffy. And Giles is not in a great place too when you look at the season arc. So
yeah,
they're both just kind of losing patience with each other. But it's kind of unfortunate after having two pretty significant like character development episodes right prior to this, right, for these two characters.
What really seems off to me is that they have a discussion about what she does and how she does it and how she's the Slayer and all this, and it ends with her making a little comment about how death wouldn't be much of a change for her and her life's not really very different from being dead anyway, which is a very angsty kind of 16-year-old girlish thing to say when you're in a bad mood as a teenage girl.
Yeah.
But Buffy's life is a lot more serious than most teenagers, and Giles just doesn't say anything. Like, the scene ends when she starts talking about being dead and how it's not any different in the show. And in the script book, he basically says, and it was cut out, but he says, must we be introspective now? Our only concern should be what was stolen from the mausoleum and nothing else. And then it ends. And both of those reactions seem really off to me because he cares about Buffy. You would think he would make sure she was okay, but he doesn't in either one. So kind of, although the one in the script book is a lot more harsh.
Yeah.
Than just not saying anything.
Yeah, that is an unfortunate thing. And I think what eventually happens is that, we talked about this being Marty Noxon's first episode. What eventually happens is we get that kind of elite writers team that comes in that know these characters so well and know these relationships so well. At a certain point, you get less and less of these inconsistencies from episode to episode. But what's happening a lot in these early episodes is they're bringing in new writers who don't necessarily have the full background in mind when they're writing a scene like this and don't necessarily think exactly where are Giles and Buffy in this point. So it feels really weird considering how close these two have already become, and especially weird with how close we know that these two characters get, that they're still at these kind of petty argument stage at this point in their timeline. But a lot of it is just chalked up to them bringing in new writers and them having to kind of work with what they have. And a lot of times in these early episodes, stuff is done to service the plot over servicing the character, and I feel like they pull away from that a little bit more as the series progresses. That is something that I have noticed a pattern of, is that a lot of times they'll just make characters act the way that they need to act in order to tell the story that they want to tell, rather than thinking about how those characters would actually act in those scenarios. But yeah, upon the line that they have to determine what was stolen, we cut to Spike holding the cross, the decoder key, and Drusilla is like hovering her hand over it, and she's sensing it humming and just like really vibing with this cross. And yeah, it's the one, it's what they needed to get the last bit of information that they needed to perform the ritual. So Spike's all excited and says that once she's well, they'll have a coronation down Main Street and drink for 7 days and 7 nights. And then Dalton, lovely Dalton, asks about the Slayer, and Spike loses his mind.
Trouble? She's the gnat in my ear, the gristle in my teeth. She's the bloody thorn in my bloody side.
He just gives one of the best speeches that I love. This is so poetic. And again, we don't know that he was a poet until season 5. But there's things that he does in these early seasons
that are very much...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so perfect, the dialogue here. But after he says this, he really kind of blows up and kicks stuff and declares all of this about what the Slayer is. And Drew whimpers Spike. I'm just wondering, though, like, is Drew already sensing that Spike is falling in love with Buffy? Is that what that whimper is? When he's, like, just screaming all of these things about Buffy, and then she just whimpers Spike?
Well, I mean, later she says that she knew, back then that he was falling for her. But I've got in my notes for this part, man, Spike overreact much, because he's not really had that many interactions with Buffy.
Yeah.
She hasn't really destroyed that many any of his plans. Like, what, 2?
Yeah, but
he is ranting about how she always ruins everything, and it's just like, not yet. Like, not yet.
Yeah, but I think it still fits because the bits that we've seen of Spike up to this point, he's really fixated on her. Like, and he really, like, he thought he had the upper hand in that first encounter, and it didn't work out. And since then, he's been studying her. He's been thinking about her constantly. And even though he hasn't really had that many interactions with her, he is constantly thinking about her. Everything he's doing seems to be partially about Buffy. It's also about healing Drew. But there's a lot of things that he's done that's just been about Buffy. You know, that partnership with Ford, that was just to get the Slayer. It didn't really help them at all with Drew. I mean, they already got the book for Drew. That did nothing to further her along. He just did all that so he could kill the Slayer. Those are his 2 primary goals, is to heal Drew and kill the Slayer. And yeah, he is so fixated on her so fast. And again, I mean, this 2-parter was supposed to be the end of Spike's story arc, which is just so funny to me because there's so much foreshadowing in this that was completely unintentional. And then we get to the part of the episode that I hate, where the Order of Taraka is mentioned, and it's just season 1 crap.
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mentioned this in the blurb, that Spike hires 3 assassins, and then later on, Giles explains that, it's a society of assassins that'll just keep coming and coming. But Drew, even in this scene, mentions that 3 of them will come. So even like Drew, with all of her clairvoyance, knows that, we're only gonna get 3 of these guys.
Yeah. And 3 is all that does come.
Yeah, so. But man, it just doesn't work for me. It doesn't do anything for me. We'll get this again with the judge. The judge doesn't really work for me either. But yeah, every now and again, they just pull in some kind of threat so that there is a threat to be had. And the Order of Taraka really does nothing other than to set up Kendra as being an enemy. That's why they exist, is so that we believe that Kendra's a bad guy, and so that when we get that reveal at the end that she's a vampire slayer, it's a big shock moment. But I feel like there's other ways that they could have done that. And I think that introducing this kind of, I don't know, just like overblown, no big whoop Order of Taraka, and it spends so much time building them up, is just really obnoxious to me. And it's like the 3 from Angel over again, you know. It's just, why are we dedicating so much time to these enemies and like building them up to such a degree, and they're literally nothing. One's killed almost instantly, one is bested by Xander and Cordelia twice, technically, like they escape and then later they kill him. And then the other one, like, is, I think, part of Spike's gang by the end of the 2nd episode, and he's like giving her orders, and I'm just like, I don't think that that's how hiring an assassin works. I don't think you just get to like command them around after that. But she's just part of the team, I guess. I don't know, like, none of them work for me, and it's the most obnoxious part about these 2 episodes for me, is the Order of Taraka.
It feels like there's a lot happening in this episode. Like, so much different stuff.
Yeah, and it's that checkbox again, right? They had a whole bunch of checkboxes that they had to tick off in order to get everything done in these episodes. And I think the Order of Taraka could have been a really cool threat if that was the point of the episode. But the Order of Taraka is just there to bring in Kendra. And I think they could have come up with a better way of introducing Kendra. And if they still wanted to do the Order of Taraka episode, do a separate episode for that and make that be the thing. Because there is something that's really cool about the concept of them. But
they never stop coming.
Yeah, but it doesn't make sense in this episode. Because, especially if you look at the timeline, they're discussing this, bringing in the big guns, right? Bringing in the Order of Taraka like it's this big whoop. And literally that same afternoon, they start arriving. Like,
yeah, that's kind of...
It's handled like with the same kind of care as ordering takeout is, you know? Yeah. And I would think if they're really that dangerous, there would be some kind of waiting list or some kind of program that would take a little while to get through before you are selected as someone that they would contract with. It is literally like, all right, we're going to bring in the Order of Taraka, and then that afternoon, you know, they're already in town ready to start killing Buffy. But anyway, from there we go back to the school, and Xander and Willow are kind of walking through the halls, and Willow's asking about Buffy, and Xander says that she's out with Giles, and Snyder comes up at this moment and also asks about Buffy, and Willow's ability to lie is still very bad.
Yes. She basically says she was here a minute ago, and it's very awkward.
Yeah, right after Snyder says, don't give me that she was here a minute ago crap.
I love this line that Xander says to Principal Snyder.
Whatever comes out of your mouth is a meaningless waste of breath. An airborne toxic event.
Well, I'm glad you feel comfortable enough to be so honest with me. And I can only hope that one day I'm in the position to be that honest with you.
And I love it. It's such an awesome kind of backhanded insult.
Yeah.
But I will point out that saying this to your principal as a high school student would have got you in trouble. But it was so good.
Yeah. It's really presented in a way that it's an insult, and Snyder knows it's an insult, but because Xander didn't actually insult him, then they play it off like he just gets away with it.
Yeah, but he could have, because this is the principal that...
Oh, yeah. Snyder wouldn't care. Snyder would... Yeah. Snyder would punish him no matter what. But to be fair, Snyder just said that, he was an airborne toxic event, basically, so...
Well, yeah. Which a principal would also not say to a student.
Yeah.
Xander says he has to go and to his seminar on being a prison guard. And Willow's like, okay, well, I'll see you later. And she just kind of stands there. And then 2 men in black come up to her and are just like, come with us, Willow Rosenberg. And kind of get on either side of her and march her away. In the script book, it says that when they go to take her to the little area where she's supposed to be, that there is a big logo on the wall that looks strangely like the Microsoft logo. I did not see that in the episode.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing they decided not to do that.
Yeah.
But that's what it is in the script, just so you know.
That's just the level of software company that they're talking about here.
Yeah. They tell her that she's been selected to meet with a head recruiter for a leading software concern, and he's on his way by jet. And her and one other student were the only 2 that met the criteria, and to sit there and, wait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In this curtained off area with classical music playing. They've got Spring by Vivaldi playing and Canapé being served. Yeah. Like it's super ritzy for being Sunnydale High.
Yeah, 2 juniors
like
in high school.
What kind of company does this?
I don't know. I can see companies doing this at colleges to recruit.
Well,
but not a high school.
Also, the way that they say this of like having incredibly high criteria and that only one other student met it. And then what I know about Oz is just like they have a flaw in their testing system.
Because would he have even taken this test? Would he have even done it?
Well, and it's implied that Willow didn't even need to take the test, that they already knew Willow was gonna be good for the job. But then it's implied that Oz just sort of tests well later on, and so because of that, he also got selected for the program, even though he has no interest and hasn't shown anything in his other schooling to show that would be something that he would want to go into. So it's real silly, but it finally gets Willow and Oz face to face, so we'll take it. And Oz offers her a canapé.
She turns around and sees him, and he offers her a canapé. And in the script book, it says that when he sees Willow, his expression registers the coolest hint of delight. I'm not sure. I don't understand what that's supposed to mean. He's supposed to be happy to see her, but not show it or whatever. I don't understand that.
I think Seth Green did a fabulous job with that, though. With that being his direction, I think he did really good.
Yeah.
Just that. It's that girl.
Yeah. It's like, it's you, look. And then we have Buffy and Giles, and they're in the graveyard, and they're going to look for whatever was taken to see if they can figure it out. And they basically kind of are arguing about Buffy being the Slayer and him being the Watcher, and she says he was harsh, which he was.
Yeah. I actually paused at that moment a little bit, but knowing the full script and what he said at the end of it, that is especially super harsh there. I imagine that the conversation has probably persisted since then, and they have continued to just not really get along very well.
Just continue to argue and bicker. Basically, they talk about her career and how Watcher and Librarian go together, but that nothing goes with Slayer. And Giles has a light bulb moment, and he says, "Have you considered law enforcement?" And she just kind of gives him a hard look.
She just glares. But here's the thing. Giles is saying that her sacred duty shouldn't prevent her from finding more gainful employment, such as he did. So is that indicating that Giles makes more as the Sunnydale High librarian than he does at the Watchers Council?
Right, because we find out later that he does get paid by the Watchers Counter.
So I don't know if, like, in this version, they thought, oh, well, the Watchers are just called like the Slayers are, and they don't get paid. But they definitely get paid.
They should all get paid.
And apparently, if this line rings true, they get paid less than the Sunnydale High librarian gets paid. Which makes me feel less bad about all those times where I'm just like, Giles should just pay for stuff for Buffy, because apparently he doesn't... what he gets paid from the Watchers Council doesn't even fold.
It can't be much. They go in and they discover that the grave belonged to someone named Dulac, and he was really evil and had been excommunicated from the Vatican and sent to Sunnydale, and that he had written the book that the vampire stole from Giles's office a couple of weeks back that he got so upset about, and that it was written in archaic Latin, and so that nobody but him and his other sect members could read it, and that it's very important that they find out what was stolen.
Yeah, and it ends with him saying something's coming and it's not good, and this is when we cut to the arrival of the Order of Taraka plus Kendra. And this is why the Order of Taraka exists, so Kendra can be framed as the bad guy, but we have kind of a rugged man with a scarred eye coming off of a bus. And then we have a middle-aged man outside of the Summers home who is immediately 10 times creepier than the rugged man. Like,
really is creepy.
Immediately more terrified of this guy. But he goes to the neighbors and offers free samples, and once he's invited inside, they zoom in on the door and there's a scream, and then someone's checking the hold of a recently landed aircraft, and a woman attacks him and sneaks out of the airplane. So that is the arrival of this week's threat, and we go to the library from there.
Although I will point out that Sunnydale, the tiny little nothing town of Sunnydale, now also boasts an airport.
Yeah.
So, it was jets. So it wasn't like little crop dusting planes. It was jets at this airport. So now we have that in Sunnydale as well.
Of course.
I'm just saying. I have to point that out. Then we are back in the library, and our Scooby Gang is sitting around talking about what could have been stolen. And they basically figure out that it was a decoder to read the ancient archaic Latin text that was stolen. And they decide they're going to have a research party all night to figure it out, and Willow is very, very excited about it. And Buffy basically says that they don't need her because she's not good at the research or figuring things out. So, and that you guys are the brain. I'm just here for moral support, and she has to leave. Which isn't really true because she almost always figures things out.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she's clever. She figures it out using instincts and logic and stuff. I mean, sometimes she even uses the books.
Yeah.
So this isn't really accurate, but they buy it and she leaves.
Xander does complain about not having snacks, though.
Yeah.
And at the end of this scene, it's just the funniest thing. But they hold on Xander and Giles just staring at each other, just both horribly upset with the situation for very different reasons.
And then the next scene opens at the skating rink, and Buffy is there ice skating. And I was really curious, so I looked it up. This is actually Buffy.
Yes.
This is Sarah Michelle Gellar. She was apparently very much into ice skating as a teenager and stuff, and they wrote this scene on purpose so she could show off her skating skills. I did not know that before I watched this time.
Yeah, and
so
it really is. I mean, again, it seems a little gratuitous considering how much they're trying to pull off in this episode to have this long montage of her ice skating. It's a nice pause in the episode that kind of just allows you to slow down a little bit because we've had a lot of information thrown at us again and again and again so far. So it's been nice, but unfortunately the Octaris, I think is his name, shows up to assassinate Buffy. I'm sure he's going to be successful in that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then Angel, we hear him yell, Buffy, and comes in, and they fight him, and they win.
Mm-hmm. So this is one of the head scratchers on whether or not this is a demon or a human, because this is definitely a situation where Buffy, no doubt, killed this being, but it's not 100% whether it's supposed to be human or demon. It is explained by Giles later in the episode that the Order of Taraka is made up of both, so it could be either or. But the sign that it was able to hold its own as well as it did against both Buffy and Angel seems to indicate that it's probably a demon. But yeah.
Yes, and then we know the one later that just runs away is a human. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go with probably a demon. Probably meant to be a demon, even though it never addresses it.
Yeah. So Drew flips the card that's supposed to represent this particular member of the Order of Taraka and says that he's already fallen. And Spike's like, I'm not worried. And I'm just like, you just called these people this morning and she's already killing them off.
Like, yeah, you should be worried.
But anyway.
Then they travel really fast.
Yeah. Efficiency is part of their selling point. We'll kill them and we'll kill them fast. We just might lose 3 or 4 guys before we get there.
Well, we go back to Buffy and Angel at the ice skating rink, and Buffy sees the ring that Octarius was wearing and kind of freaks out and tells Buffy she's got to get somewhere safe. She has to go home, which isn't really safe, but she has to get somewhere safe. Yeah. Because these are bad guys and you're in danger. And then they have a really sweet scene where Buffy's trying to take care of Angel's eye, and he gets upset that she's touching him with his vamp face because he hasn't, for some reason, gone back to his regular face yet. Mm-hmm. And she tells him she didn't even notice, and then they start making out. And we see that Kendra is watching them. Yep. We don't know it's Kendra yet, but the assassin that got off the airplane is watching them.
Air quotes assassin.
Yes, definitely air quotes.
So this is funny to me because they have this wide shot of like Buffy and Angel just kissing so passionately, like they're so in love, right? And it's so romantic. And literally a couple feet away is the dead guy.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of used to that.
I know they're used to it, but it's still funny to me. It's just like you couldn't have figured out a different way to frame that shot.
So then we go back to the library, and Buffy has an ice pack on her knee, which got hurt. Giles is basically saying that Angel was right to be upset by the ring and tells her it's the Order of Taraka. And they are, demon assassins. Yeah. Dating back to King Solomon.
Yeah.
And Xander starts making jokes, and Giles gets really upset and kind of snaps at Xander that that's enough. And tells Buffy that she's got to get somewhere safe. She needs to find a safe house. They need to find a safe house to keep her in. Mm-hmm. And now Buffy finally gets kind of worried because now Angel and Giles have both told her to get gone.
Yes.
And that she's in a lot of danger.
Yeah. And I feel like if this was an isolated episode, if the Order of Taraka was the point of the episode and they actually built up this threat and handled it correctly, this would have been a really good episode of Buffy.
But they tried to do too much.
Yeah, they tried to do too much, and the Order of Taraka just kind of felt underwhelming after this particular speech, which is really menacing and terrifying. And to, do it again where they're showing, the creepy guy in the neighbor's house looking through to Buffy's window while he's talking about no matter how many that she kills, there will always be more. They won't stop coming until the job is done. It really is very menacing and threatening feeling. And there's a couple of bits that I really enjoy about that setup, but unfortunately it just doesn't amount to anything in the episodes themselves. But what I will say is that when Giles snaps at Xander, it is one of my favorite bits from this episode because they take a moment to show everybody's reaction and how everybody is really uncomfortable with that.
That this happened.
With that. And coming off of the Dark Age and everything that they've just learned about Giles and having that moment where there is a pause and then Giles apologizes and says it's just not the time for jokes. I think it's like a really heavy moment to show where all of those characters are and how they're still trying to figure out each other. But yeah, I really like that they took the time to show each each of them individually react to Giles yelling at Xander, and it's exquisite. I love that moment.
It is really good. And then we break to Buffy walking down the hall of the high school, and she's just kind of looking around about how, everyone might be a threat to her.
Mm-hmm. See, and I think this is cool too. Like, if this was the episode and you had more of this paranoia side of it, because like this little really section is really cool. Like this idea of I am constantly being hunted and I don't know who's the next person who's going to try to attack me. And if that was an entire episode, that would be awesome. Like, I even like the little like moment where you got the guy combing his hair and it sounds like a freaking razor blade shinging across the scalp of, like, it's like really cool editing.
And pulls it out of his pocket.
Yeah,
which kind of creepy because he could be going for a weapon. Yeah. And then Oz walks up on her and she grabs Oz and throws him up against the wall. Which again, she has no idea who Oz is, even though they both go to this supposedly tiny school, and they're both juniors.
Well, he's a senior.
Oh, no, Oz is a senior, but still, they still know each other. And then he says she's a tense person.
Yes, and I love that word choice. I'm so glad they went with person and not woman. I am so glad. It's just the littlest little thing. But if Oz had said in that moment, that's a tense woman, I would have been so upset.
Yeah.
So from there, we get this short little moment where Buffy's outside of her house, and she's kind of looking at the door and chooses not to go in. And
it ends up being a good choice.
Yeah, and we're not really sure where she's headed yet. We'll get there in a few minutes, but right now we're back at the library. Giles and Willow and Xander are kind of talking about how Buffy just took off, wish that there was more that they could do, and Xander comes in and says that she's not at home, and he's been trying to call her, and she's not answering, and Willow says that she's glad that, she took it seriously and everything, but just wish that she knew where she was. And that's where we see that Buffy has arrived at Angel's apartment.
Mm-hmm. And he's not home, so she goes in and lays down in his bed.
Mm-hmm. And as far as I know, this is the first time that she's been like inside his apartment.
Yeah, I think so too.
And you can kind of see that she's looking around. Like we've seen in the episode where she talks about walking him home, but I'm not sure if she's ever really been inside, but she's kind of taking in the apartment and like looking at the art and stuff like that. And she still has a limp, which I think again supports the idea that that was definitely a demon she fought earlier. But yeah, it's another one of those quiet moments that shows that Angel's kind of Buffy's comfort space, right? Like she feels safe with Angel, and it's something that we've talked about a few times. We talked about it when she was bad, and it's going to continue to be something that is built on until, of course, surprise, when everything goes all to hell.
Yeah. And then the next scene is a seedy bar. And there's a guy, sweeping the floor, and he looks up and he sees a shadowed figure in the door, which you can tell it's Angel.
Uh-huh.
And he says, "We're closed. Can't you read the sign?" And then realizes it's Angel, and apparently they know each other. They have a pass.
Yes.
And this is the first time we see Willie, although he will be in every season. And basically, Angel wants to get information from Willie about who sent the assassins and about Spike, and Willie resists and then finally tells Angel basically what he wants to know. And at one point, we were talking about this last episode about the pig's blood. Willie tells Angel, "I've got some fresh pig's blood in, and it's the good stuff."
Yeah.
So this is the first reference to pig's blood.
Pig's blood being
that Angel
alternative.
Yeah, drinks pig's blood.
Again, I love Angel in this episode, and this is so good.
Oh, yeah, it's really good.
Let's try again. The Order of Taraka, they're after the Slayer. Come on, man.
Was it Spike?
Look, Angel, I got some good pig's blood in. Good stuff, my friend.
I'm a little rusty when it comes to killing humans. It could take a while.
The fact that they allowed him to go to this place to just threaten Willie's life and do so in such a similar way to what I kind of expect him to do in the Angel series, right? I feel like this is the first glimpse of that side of Angel, kind of skirting with the dark side of himself in a way to do good, like to allow himself to humor that demon inside of him in a way to get to a certain end. happened. And this, like, just slamming Willie into the bar and saying that he's a little rusty when it comes to killing humans is like
very new.
Such a different type of way of handling things than we've seen Angel do in the past. And it's something that he does again and again on his own show of using that power, of that strength, of that intimidation to get what he wants. But this is the first time I think we really see it, and it's great. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a very fun scene to watch. And then Kendra shows up and she hits Angel across the temple with something, and he hits the ground, and they basically start fighting. Kendra and Angel start fighting, and they crash into stuff in the back room, and Angel like falls into what looks like a little storage area and asks her, "Who are you?" and tells her he won't hurt her if she tells him what she needs to know. And then Kendra starts kind of smirking and locks him in a cage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has the line of, "You think this is funny," and she closes and latches to the door. And then we hear the accent.
For the first time. Yeah.
Woof. Okay, so the accent, no fault to the actress, Bianca Lawson, is actually, does well enough with what she was given, because it was a last-minute decision to put on this accent, and they went for a really tough accent to make sound not kooky and weird. But it makes it really hard to, one, take her seriously in certain areas. And there's even times where she says stuff, and this sounds so terrible, but she uses the word threaten. And I literally, when I was listening to it, I couldn't understand that she was saying threaten until Angel repeated the word. And then I understood what she was trying to say. Like, it's just so heavy, the accent that they give her. And she's trying to make it work, but it just doesn't work. And I do appreciate some of the ideas that they had with that, of having her be more exotic, to have a person of color be the other Slayer. And we know how this ends, and it's the unfortunate aspect of Buffy that its representation of racial diversity is severely lacking, and a lot of times ends with the person dying. And we're going to talk about that a bit more in next week's episode, because that is when Kendra is more of the focus of it. But it is an unfortunate part of Kendra's character, is that in trying to make her, I guess, more representative, they kind of just showed themselves as more racist, maybe? It's hard
maybe
to
more
watch.
Thoughtless.
Yeah.
Maybe more thoughtless. Because I think the intention was good.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said about
her
having...
character could have been... Yeah, her character could have been done without the accent.
Yeah, it could have been done without the accent, and it could have been done still with some grace on a level that showed that she wasn't from here. You could have gone with a more subtle accent. You didn't have to go so severe on the accent. If you wanted to show that she was from another part of the world, you could still do that. But the fact that they went for such an extreme accent, it feels like a rash decision that wasn't really
thought out.
Yeah, it wasn't.
But then a lot of this episode feels very rash.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate. It takes me out of the story with Kendra. Every time I hear her accent, it's just it's something that I remember being bad, but whenever I hear it, it's always worse than I had thought it was. And I mean, it's right up there with David Boreanaz's Irish accent. Like they're just both terrible accents that take you out of the show.
The Irish one, when he does that one does take me out of the show, because yeah. Kendra's, I understand that it's bad and way too heavy, but it doesn't take me out of the story watching her. Basically, Kendra lets him know that she's looking for the girl he was with. She's looking for Buffy, even though she doesn't know who Buffy is. And Angel says he's going to get out of there, and Kendra points out that the sun's going to come up in a few hours, and it's going to shine through that window, and you're going to be dust.
Yeah, she's very directionally minded. She knew when she locked him in that cage. She's like, Eastern exposure right there, baby.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known that. Then we go back to Giles in the library, and he is on the phone with Xander and tells Xander to go to her house to look for her, which after all the warnings and threats and stuff about how dangerous these assassins are, sending Xander to her house to check on her seems kind of irresponsible.
That's okay. He sent Cordelia to go with him.
Well, yes. And Giles says, I don't know how you're going to get there, have Cordelia drive you. And then he goes into the regular part of the library, and I just love this scene that's coming. Mm-hmm. But Willow is asleep with her head on a desk, and he kind of gently shakes her, and she says,
Don't warm the tadpoles.
I have been waiting for this line.
Oh, okay.
For a very specific reason. When she explains that she has frog fear. I have met 2 people that have frog fear. I'm sure there's a phobia name for it, but I don't know it. And it is super crippling for both of them. It is like the most intense fear that I've encountered. And I don't know if I've just met the 2 people that are that serious about it, but my roommate is one of them. And it is... she can't function around frogs. So the fact that Willow has frog fear has always been amusing to me, because to me that is like the most debilitating fear you can have.
I've never really considered that frog fear would be debilitating in any way.
Oh, it's
like, I mean, are you just not? I don't really.
Yeah, I just know. I just happen
around frogs that much.
Yeah, I just happen to know the people who are that scared of frogs.
But even being that scared of frogs, how often are they around frogs?
There's always, especially around these parts in summer, there's frogs outside everywhere. But I think what it is, and I've thought about this, is that there's a lot of things out there that people are scared of, but that those things are also scared of us, right? I mean, snakes and spiders and all of those things tend to shy away from us, but frogs will just hop on you. They don't give a crap. They'll just jump at you. Yeah. So I can kind of understand, like, not wanting to get near a frog if you're scared of frogs, because frogs will come at you in a way that a lot of other things that people are afraid of won't. They'll just jump right on you.
Never actually thought about that.
So, yeah. But yeah, Giles says that he's found a description of the Duloc manuscript, and that it's a ritual, and the believed purpose of it is to restore a vampire back to health. And Willow immediately says, like Drusilla.
Yeah, which they leave it there, and it's really creepy. And then we go back to Spike, who is really excited because they finally figured it out, and the key to the cure was right in front of them, and it was Angel.
Mm-hmm. Which isn't admitted, but his hand is directed to a tarot card of a fallen angel, so it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. And they talk about how it was right in front of them.
Also, can we talk about how just very specific Drusilla's tarot cards are?
Right? They just basically tell you everything you need to know. You don't even have to interpret them. No. They're just, these cards are just like, hey, here's what it is right here on this card. And then the next scene is Buffy's house, and it is Cordelia and Xander arriving at the house. Mm-hmm. Cordelia's basically bickering with Xander about him calling her to give him a ride to Buffy's house.
Which, to be fair, in my mind, the way that this timeline works, Giles had that conversation with Xander at 3 a.m. that he needed to go and check on Buffy's house. The way that the night works, it had to have been, because it was right after Kendra was just it's a few more hours till the sun comes up. So... yeah. She really did get woken up, really early to come and do this.
Yeah. But this is also the first time that they refer to themselves as a Scooby Gang.
Yes.
Yes. Which they will do for, the entirety of the series.
Mm-hmm. Come on, Cordelia. You want to be a member of the Scooby Gang, you got to be willing to be inconvenienced every now and then.
Oh, right, because I lie awake at night hoping you tweakers will be my best friends.
So that's our first reference to that nickname for the group. And Cordelia's basically makes a catty comment about, I really want to be friends with y'all.
Well, I mean, you did actually give him a ride, so yes.
Xander breaks in a window and then opens the door for her. And she goes in and basically asks him, if Buffy is in trouble, what are you going to do? She's the superhero and you're just a guy.
Yeah. She gets it.
He starts looking around the house, and she just kind of stands there in the living room, and then hears a knock on the door, and she goes to open it, and it is the assassin. Mm-hmm. And he offers her some free skincare samples, as she says, free, and then lets him in and closes the door.
Yeah, they do the exact same zoom in as well that they did for when he entered the other door. There's a nice consistency there. No scream this time. Also, that this is the actual house that the Summers residence is based off of. They filmed on location for this section of it. So that's a little nugget of information that I read while I was researching things about this episode. So after this, they kind of switched to a sound stage for most of it, but this is the actual house. So when he goes in through the window, that's the actual location there that he does that. From there, you get a quick flash of Angel trying to break free as the sun is kind of starting to encroach in on him, and then it cuts to Buffy, who is asleep in Angel's bed still, and she starts to wake up and then immediately jumps into action as an axe comes down where her head was, which, I mean, Kendra doesn't waste any time, apparently.
And they start fighting and kind of have a pretty equal fight.
Yeah.
And then they're both kind of looking at each other, and Kendra says, "Who are you?" And Buffy's like, "What do you mean, who am I? You're the one that attacked me." And Kendra says, "I'm Kendra, the Vampire Slayer." And then we end the episode.
Yep. With Buffy's big eyes, very confused.
Yeah, what's going on?
So, we haven't really talked about this, and I think we can take a few minutes just now. I love the fact that this is a consequence of Prophecy Girl, of the fact that she did technically die. And because of that, it was enough to call the next Slayer in the cycle. And it makes for a really interesting arc, especially in the next episode when we start reflecting more on this idea of, does that mean that she can have a normal life? And this is something that we're built towards the entire series, is this idea of more Slayers means less pressure off of Buffy. Kendra dies rather quickly, and Faith isn't a reliable Slayer, so the pressure kind of always comes back to Buffy until, of course, the very end of the series.
We can technically make a lot more Slayers. I mean, it doesn't go with Buffy anymore. Like, a Slayer is not called anymore if Buffy dies. Mm-hmm. But when Kendra dies, Faith is called.
Yes.
So, I mean, we could technically take Faith to the hospital and, have her heart stopped for, 30 seconds and then restarted, and it would probably call a third Slayer.
Yeah. And that's
they could do it to that Slayer, and, they could, if they really wanted to, they could get, a dozen Slayers.
Yes. And it's something that has been discussed by fans before of, why that wasn't explored more of that option. One, it's just perhaps one of the more unethical things that you could potentially do. But two, it's something that is against what the Watchers Council would want to do, right? The Watchers Council doesn't want more Slayers. That's not what they're about. They want a Slayer at a time that they can control, and then when that Slayer dies, then they can get another Slayer that they can control. They have something built into their Slayer line that kills them at 18, basically. So it is kind of that darker side of the Watchers Council of they have no interest in more Slayers. They like having one at a time.
Right, but I mean, there are Slayers in different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. They're not all just in Sunnydale. There's evil. We find that out when the Angel series start. There's badness going on here too.
Oh yeah, there's logic to your plan. There's logic to your plan, and there's a ton of logic to Buffy's plan at the end of the series, but neither one fit the way that the Watchers Council is framed.
I'm just saying. It's an idea.
And it's something that's implied that the potentials, who aren't superpowered in any way, are also used as cannon fodder. The ones that they have found, that they have trained, even if they don't get called, I think they're still sent out to fight.
Are they?
I mean, there's still that implication at the very least. Because what else are they going to do? I mean, that's what they've been trained for all their life. If they get them young enough and train them their entire life to do that task, what else are they going to do with them?
Which brings to question, do they have a way of figuring out who's going to be a potential? How would you even do that?
Well, they do perform a spell in season 7. Willow has a spell that she uses when they think that Dawn is a potential, and it turns out to actually be Amanda.
But think of all the girls in the world. Is the Watchers Council just performing this spell on every female in the world?
Well, it was like a homing beacon one. It wasn't like they had to do it directly. It was a homing beacon one. And I'm not sure if they explained that was something that the Watchers Council used or what. But I think there are ways to detect a potential using magic. But there are so many of them out there that you can't detect them all, which is why a situation like Buffy occurred where she had no idea and was called. I like the idea of the consequence of Prophecy Girl leading to another Slayer being called.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never had a problem with this idea. Like, people have suggested, oh, well, if they knew that, then why don't they just do this idea of temporarily killing the current Slayer to activate another one so you have more Slayers. I've never begrudged the show for not doing that because I think...
Oh, no, I don't think the show should have done that.
I think that it's entirely unethical to do that.
Yeah, I was pointing out that it's an option.
Yeah, and I'm fine with the fact that the show never even discussed it as an option because for me it's such a dark option that I wouldn't have liked our people discussing it as an option. But it is something that with this knowledge going forward, someone would have considered it had Buffy not just created the Slayer race and completely changed the rules. You know, somebody would have been dark enough to be like, ooh, I can get multiple Slayers if I just start picking them off and bringing them back to life, which is terrifying.
Well, anyway, that is What's My Line Part 1.
Yep, we'll be back with Part 2 next week. And we will get to see how this story concludes. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. That's my spoiler for my opinion on the second part of this two-parter. But yeah, we'll be back next week, and we thank you so much for listening. You think I got enough so's in there?
Yeah.
All right. This is where we say bye.
Bye.
Yeah, but you got Ted. You keep not wanting to watch Ted and Bad Eggs.
Are Ted and Bad Eggs are they between them or after them? And no, I don't want to watch Ted and Bad Eggs.
Ted and Bad Eggs, and then surprise.